to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll take a moment now and we'll do a silent prayer or meditation or reflection, whatever's in your heart. Thank you. All right, if it's all right with y'all, we've got some really good speakers who let me, I don't like taking time away from them. And for our guests, probably don't want to stay to speak, stuff like that. So I'm either gonna ask that we save the business until after the program, or that we do it online, or that we meet sometime next week for lunch and just have a business meeting at lunch. So just let me know what your preference is gonna be about that. But I hate taking up people's time with business when we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. Before I do that, though, I want Sandy, what's your name? I want Sandy to tell us about this card that she got.
I found this actually on a couple of Democratic signs, and it's a company called Signs of Justice. And you can buy these and then you have to pay postage, but it's actually meant to be sent to your representative in Congress. And it's nonpartisan in that they're saying this is the polls of what most of Americans want, is Black-owned business. And so you can find them by signsofjustice.com. And I ordered 15. I haven't just mailed them yet, but these are kind of cool if you don't want to take the time to write it out yourself, because these are some good statistics saying this is not an extreme. 85% approved background checks, 74% trans rights protections, 70% safe and legal abortion, and 70% passive citizenship.
Good idea, Sandy. Thank you. And I'm definitely gonna mention it because I don't like to write postcards. I don't like to write anything. So that will work for me. I want to show you that we have some new t-shirts. We want people to know what we're all about. We're about positive change, positive, and we want people to know who we are. So be sure to sign, get your sign and get your pizza. And then on the back, we're going to add to this list, I think, but we want people to know that we have their back. We want them to know that we have their public schools, their hospitals and clinics, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Leslie suggested that we put housing on there because that's very important. And if you can think of anything else that should be one of the main focuses, we need to get the message out. And so we have, if you want a t-shirt, and I hope most people will, but if you don't, I understand that too. I'm gonna pass this around and just put your name. And I think the organization is gonna try to pay for all of it. Of course, you can donate to the organization as well if you want to. Speaking of donations, there's also a donation box up there. But if you want one, please fill this out and send it there.
Color choice.
The yellow, the gray, there's white, there's light blue. And put your and probably black. Just put your color preference and we'll try to get it as closely as possible. Okay. It is my honor today to introduce a good friend. I've known Hal for a long time. It seems like years are like days now, but when I need political commentary, I'm always interested in what Hal has to say. Hal is a professor emeritus and at OBU in political science. He is also a political commentator. You may have seen him on TV many times. So he is well versed and well respected scholar of political science. And so Hal is very gracious to come today and speak with you. I don't want to take up any more of your time. And also, he and Mitzi are so good about supporting this group in Clark County. They always support the Young Democrats. We don't have an active group at Henderson. We really would like to have one, but there is an active group at OBU, and they are going to sponsor them they always sponsor them at our banquet. So Hal, please come on.
Thank you, Judy. This is back from the home. I'm so glad to be here to see dear friends from decades. Thank you for indulging me in my prattlings today. And I will try to keep my prepared marks short enough that we can have time for some questions and dialogue before you turn to business today. I'm going to talk about Trump and the Constitution. Constitution Day being on the horizon here. And I'll be using the word constitution in two different ways. They're related, but they're different. One way is to focus on the founding document itself. I've got a copy somewhere here in my pocket. I thought I did.
Too many pockets, like my
Yeah, here we
purse.
go. Here we go. Copy of the Constitution, the written document as amended and as interpreted over the centuries now. But I'll also be using the word constitution. Talk about the way we've constituted ourselves politically, what we've set ourselves to do politics and government here. And my thesis is going to be that our constitutional framers back in 1787 saw Trump coming. And they thoughtfully established ways and means to address the threat he now poses to their and our project here. Nevertheless, there are some foundations in theory and practice on which the actions that Trump is pursuing can be understood here. I'm going to talk to them for a minute. But I also want to talk about the ways that we have constituted ourselves over the last 250 years, old and new, that have the effect of reinforcing or enabling or buttressing Trump's project to undermine the Constitution. And these constitutional factors or features have limited our capacity to employ the kinds of defenses and safeguards that the framers put in place for us to use. I'm going to begin with an extended quotation from the British economist John Maynard Keynes, who had this actually he wrote back in 1936. The ideas of economists and political philosophers, both when they are right and when they are wrong, are more powerful than is commonly understood. Indeed, the world is ruled by little else. Practical men who believe themselves to be quite exempt from any intellectual influences are usually the slave of some defunct economist. Mad men in authority who hear voices in the air are distilling their frenzy from some academic scribbler for a few years back. Do you recognize anybody in that quote? Okay. What I want to do first is look at a couple of key ideas that powerfully inform the agenda being pursued by President Trump as it pertains to the Constitution. The first thing I'll talk about, you got to give me a break here. I hadn't talked all summer. I'm back to school now. Voice is not up to the task. The first thing I want to talk about is what's known as the Lockean prerogative. And then I want to talk about the unitary presidency. These two concepts that undergird the Trump assault. The Lockean prerogative addresses the vital issue of presidential power under the Constitution. How much power should the president have? How much power does the president have in a constitutional order? And this topic has long been debated by presidents themselves and by scholars of the presidency. And three positions have been put forward. And I want to mention the other two and then focus on the Lockean position. William Howard Taft, back in the 19 teens, after he was president and before he was chief justice, gave a series of lectures. Yes,
Could you speak up just a little bit?
I'll do my best. Again, I'll do my best. William Howard Taft in the 19-teens gave a series of lectures on presidential office. And he advanced what has become known as the constitutional theory of presidential power. And his argument was the president had the power expressly granted to the president in the Constitution. But there was no undefined reserve that a president could claim outside those grants. Now, when Taft made that argument, he was challenging the views of his successor his predecessor in the White House, who tried to be his successor. That was Teddy Roosevelt. Because Roosevelt expressed a very different view of presidential power. His argument, which we call the stewardship or the trustee theory of presidential power, essentially says, as long as the Constitution does not expressly forbid a presidential action, then the president should be able to extend the exercise of power beyond which that is specifically enumerated in the Constitution. Why in this plain room here? The president serves the system as a trustee or as a steward of we the people, and needs some elbow room here. Now, the third view, the one I want to focus on, comes from the writings of John Locke, who obviously was a pre-constitutional English political theorist back in the 1780s and 90s. He wrote in the setting. He wrote in the setting of the Glorious Revolution. And if you're sketchy on your British history, the Glorious Revolution was the movement that established constitutional monarchy and parliamentary supremacy in 17th century England here. And Locke was on board with that development. He was a supporter of that movement to constrain the executive, the monarch, and to empower the legislature here. Nevertheless, in his own writings, he argued for what he called the royal prerogative. We had just limited the king's power, but he argued that we need to have a willingness to accept in times of crisis, in times of emergency, executive actions, in his own words, without prescription of law. That's Roosevelt. Great. Even this is by far the most expansive of presidential power. It has unquestionably found expression and support in the American experience. Most notably, actions taken by Abraham Lincoln in the critical context of the Civil War, and to a slightly lesser extent, Franklin Roosevelt in the days leading up to World War II and during World War II. And by and large, those exercises have been rewarded with popular support. In other words, it was, the oxes in the ditch had to be done, and glad they did it. Here. For what it's worth, Richard Nixon embraced this view in your historical memory here. And of course, the lack of success in that claim was rooted in the unwillingness to accept his claim that the crisis warranted the extraordinary action. Like Nixon, Donald Trump is utilizing this prerogative theory and the claim of crisis to justify the unconstitutional actions that he is taking. Now, the concept of the unitary presidency. And by the way, I'll elaborate on this if y'all want in the question here. Just trying to lay it out in broad fashion. The concept of the unitary presidency claims deep constitutional foundations, but it's a modern development. Dates back only about 50 years. To show you how old I am, when I was doing my presidential studies, we didn't talk about the unitary presidency. Showed up in the literature in the early 1980s, a little bit in the late 1970s, but mainly associated with the Reagan era here. And it came primarily from legal scholars. I'm proud to say very few political scientists were on board with this. Within the legal community, it got quite a bit of support. And as we're going to find out, some of the guys who were supporting it have ended up on the Supreme Court in recent years. 20. Sure, no problem. The essential idea of the unitary presidency is that the president, in the constitutional role, chief executive, head of the executive branch, leads that branch with minimal interference from the other branches of government. In other words, it kind of dilutes the constitutional notion of checks and balances here. Doesn't ignore them, it just doesn't prioritize. It focuses on the president's discretion as the chief executive within the president's domain, the executive branch. The roots of this argument in constitutional theory and practice are twofold. One was the decision of the framers back in 1787 to designate a single individual as both head of state and chief executive, departing from the British practice, which puts the monarch as the head of state and the prime minister as the chief executive. So going against that British model, we went with one individual leading the executive branch. And the second comes from the wording of the first sentence of Article 2, the executive article. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. Now I want you to try to gather where this is coming from by giving you the parallel statements in Article 1, the legislative article, and Article 3, the judicial article. Article 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. See the omission there. In the Roosevelt stewardship, doctrine kind of goes along with that. Article 3, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. In other words, there are multiple actors responsible for the exercise of the judicial power. But advocates of the unitary presidency view with considerable skepticism most efforts by Congress and the courts to constrain the president in the performance of the powers as chief executive here. And Trump obviously acts according to this interpretation. And even more problematical is the, I guess, unsurprising willingness of the majority of the justices currently on the Supreme Court to do so. Now, what I want to do, having laid out these kind of what I call intellectual foundations on which Trump's assault rests, I want to talk now for the remainder of my prepared remarks very quickly and without elaboration on a number of developments, old and new, in how we constitute ourselves that are reinforcing this challenge that the prerogative theory and the unitary presidency pose for our constitutional project. First and foremost, I want us to recall the potential impact that the emergence of political parties imposed on our constitutional order. Remember, the framers wrote in the absence of political parties, but almost immediately by the 1790s, parties were up and going and operating here. In particular, the emergence of political parties affected my talk today and our discussion today in terms of the development of a new presidential role, a new responsibility for the president, that of party leader, accorded on the basis of the president's position at the head of the party ticket in elections. Now, this developed and it's in place as Jefferson comes along. Has in theory two alternative directions it can take us. But I'm going to suggest both lead to problems for the constitutional order. On the one hand, a president with compliant partisan majorities in Congress. In other words, unified party government can claim to be not only the constitutionally stipulated chief executive, but also head of the government here, not sharing power as much as directing in the exercise of power with congressional majorities accepting subservience. Can you see this is what is going on in the contemporary Congress where Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, a constitutional officer says, yes, sir. What you need. I would argue that this development of chief of government has been complemented more recently with the rising presence of partisanship within the judiciary and essentially Republican justices on the Supreme Court, seeing their role as to enable the exercise of presidential power by President Trump. Now, the flip side of this development occurs when the president faces an opposing partisan majority in a congressional chamber, or in theory, the courts. Then the Madisonian model of checks and balances gets reinforced. It gets intensified. But the prospects of gridlock are deadlock looming. And under those circumstances, the president, via the Lockean prerogative, can claim that the exercise of executive authority is essential to impose the crisis imposed by the gridlock. Somebody's going to do something. The president's the one to do it. Now, a couple of related developments pertain to this point about how parties, unified or divided, shape the landscape here. I'm going to talk briefly in the next couple of minutes about both divided government and polarization. Divided government, where there is two parties with majorities or control of one of the branches of government, was once relatively rare. We've always had the possibility of it, but it didn't happen very often. Since World War II, it's become much more normal to have this divided government. Polarization refers to the heightened intra-party unity and inter-party division that we are now seeing in our political scene. Again, you guys some of y'all are as old as I am here. You remember when there were liberal Republicans like Winthrop Rockefeller and conservative Democrats like John McClellan. Those creatures are extinct, at least in the elective arena. They may be out there in isolated pastures in the electorate. They're not there. what's happened, and we're the ones who did it. With party realignment, as the Democrats became more uniformly liberal and the Republicans even more uniformly conservative with the departure of Southern whites from the ranks of the Democratic Party. We're the remnant in this room here. Now, what I want to suggest to you is that this divided government phenomenon essentially gives elbow room for presidents to go against the gridlock it imposes. And polarization makes it harder and harder to find the common ground to proceed with bipartisan compromises here. These developments are reinforced by two related phenomena: negative partisanship and partisan sorting. What do we mean by negative partisanship? The heightened feelings of antagonism that have emerged directed toward nominees and members of the opposing party, extending challenges to their very legitimacy. And you see that polarization makes it easier to demonize the other party because you can't find much you have in common with them. This phenomenon has grown, and I think you see it on both sides of the spectrum here. What do we mean by partisan sorting? The growing tendencies we have to associate physically and virtually with folks like us. We engineer our worlds, and I'm guilty, to avoid interaction with the other. And this widens the divide that makes it impossible or difficult to proceed. Madison's idea back in the 1780s was that we would have cross-cutting divisions across the country. They would keep coherent, cohesive majorities from tyrannizing the rest of us here. But with polarization, with negative partisanship, with partisan sorting, we are reinforcing the divisions into basically two armed camps here. And this calls for the crisis resolution that the president claims to offer. There's two final trends I want to mention, then I'll let you all get in on the act here. One pertains to media developments. We're establishing, or we are encountering, substantial fragmentation in the media, along with much more blatant partisanship in the media that harkens back really to the 19th century here. Both of these trends reduce the likelihood of finding kind of a common ground, a consensus, a point where we can go forward together here. The other refers to party competition. For most of our national experience, beginning in the late 1700s, we've had one party that tended to be dominant for an extended period of time. Think about the Jeffersonians carrying on to Madisonians and Monroeans and that quarter century of clear democratic rule. Think about the Republicans after the Civil War until the Great Depression. Then think about the Democrats from the Depression into really the 70s here. That was the norm. Other parties, the other party would win every once in a while. But most of the time you knew who the majority party was. We're in the era, and we were kind of there back in the 1880s and 90s. We're in an era now where majorities are very fragile. This is evidenced by the rise of divided government here. No party has held the White House for more than 8 years since the Republicans in the 80s. And if you take out that one example, since World War II. It's more like a ping pong match back and forth. And Congress has been ping ponging as well, as you all can remember. Now, you ask, so what? What these insecure majorities do is encourage the party in power when it has, like the Republicans do now, or like the Democrats did in the first 2 years of the Obama presidency, to swing for the fences. Here. That is to do all you can while you can, because you know that just around the corner is the next election that's going to take that power away from you here. And that gives, again, this motif of crisis interest, that gives an urgency to the party in power right now when the conditions warranted here. Neither party has the stable hope here. Okay, I'm gonna wind this down. We find ourselves this afternoon confronting a witch's brew of developments and trends that threaten our very survival as a constitutional government. We have to accept that the fears we have in this room are neither understood nor appreciated by many of our fellow citizens here. Nevertheless, I'm cautiously confident that we're going to survive this threat. The constitutional structures of separation of powers, checks and balances, and I hadn't talked about it much, but federalism are alive and well, even if weakened a bit by current developments. They remain sufficiently intact to keep me hopeful. Still, we can't shrink from the challenges we face of confronting those who both support the Trump agenda and those who resign to shrug their shoulders and accept it as irresistible. I wish I could wave a magic wand and make right all that's wrong, but I can't. One thing we can do is what you all are doing right now, and that is encouraging civic education. And Judy, if we could get this agenda in the schools instead of a lot of the stuff we're getting in its place, we as a country would be much better off. Thanks for listening to me as I bumbled through this, and I'll be glad to answer any questions or comments. Yes, Andy?
I know. It's always gonna be me. In your magic wand of being cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
Do you see any chance that Republicans in the Senate and the House are going to grow a spine at some point and try to halt some of what Trump is doing?
Not in the short run, even though I think many of them, and I'll give them credit, do understand that they need to. But when you think about members of Congress and why they do what they do, think first and foremost about their perceived need to get reelected. And that's job one here. And the current climate, how we are constituted these days, is one that gives to the dominant party in a district or a state, and most states do have dominant parties and districts. We're normal here, aren't we? Having 4 safe seats for our congressional representatives here. Makes them less worried about getting beat by Democrats in November and more worried about getting primaried back in March by a loyal Trumpian candidate who can claim the money and the energy that's available to them. In other words, I think they are trapped like rats.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And well, that's a breather. But the other thing, I mentioned John Locke in the English setting a minute ago. I'm gonna mention another movement in Great Britain. This was one more in the late 19th and early 20th century. It's called the Fabian movement. And it was a group of democratic socialists who were trying to bring their ideas to power, kind of like the guy in New York's doing right now. And they realized that they weren't going to win in the short run. But they argued they could win by delay. Here, put off the battle. They were called Fabians because that was the way a Roman general named Fabius fought Hannibal back in the Carthaginian wars. Didn't take on Hannibal in a frontal assault. Let him extend his supply lines, let him get cold and hungry, and then pounce. Here. The analogy I'm drawing here is, I think the Trump guys are overextending themselves. And I think we can win by delay. In other words, if we can just keep things in the courts tied up, limited there, there'll be an element of self-destruction on their part. If not, an electoral overturn here. But I do think the smartest thing that Democrats can do right now is keep Trump and his agenda in the courts, even though they're going to get some support from the Trump appointed justices there. You can still stall for time. And I think time's our friend here. Could be wrong, have been before. Does that help?
Yes. Also. This guy in New York.
Yeah.
Who apparently, I mean, I haven't paid that much attention to him,
He's gonna win.
but if Trump hates him, I have to like him. So I gotta say,
Yeah.
you know.
That's that negative partisanship we're talking about.
Yes, exactly, yes. So do you think he has a shot? Cause I mean, I don't
He's gonna
care,
win.
he's a communist.
He's gonna win. Now, the question is, can he govern once he wins? And we've got to recognize the rest of the country is not like New York. New York is not representative of the rest of the country. And it remains to be seen what that does to strategies that Democratic candidates elsewhere adopt.
Yeah.
But given the electoral setting in New York, I'm I guess, you never say never.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to imagine, based on the money going out and the poll results I've seen, that any of his opponents can overcome him. And part of it is that he has several opponents, which divides up the opposition. If it's a two-person race, I'd be a little less confident in his chances. I don't know that he'll get 50%, but doesn't need it
Right.
to win. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
Got a question about, one of the things that stuck with me from my college history was the Enabling Act and how it compares. People tell me I'm nuts, but it looked to me like my reading of Project 2025 and the Enabling Act, there's a whole lot there in common, or am I wrong?
No, I just think, overreach is the common thread. I think you're seeing they're moving beyond.
Put everything into the executive.
Yeah, again, crisis justifies it. And if it's our guys doing it, it's okay. If it's their guys doing it, it's not okay.
What about sending the National Guard into the chosen cities against the wishes of their state or their mayor or their governor?
It's an awful precedent to set. One that I think, were a Democratic president doing it, you would see outrage out the kazoo being expressed. And I confess I'd probably be sympathetic with that, because I think that it fundamentally alters civil military relations in a country that has, by and large, avoided that kind of tension that has destroyed political order in so many states and countries around the world. Here, I just think it's a road you don't want to go down. I don't think it's fair to the National Guards. to deploy them in that fashion. They are not set up. There is a law on the books, the Posse Comitatus Act, that does ostensibly limit the use of the police power by the military. But I think again, it's just bad form, bad policy. There's, you know, I think you can crack down on crime to your heart's content without going in that direction.
The money could have been spent on more police.
Sure, I mean, there's,
I mean, there wasn't any need of soldiers. They have the money to spend.
again, it's just kind of overreach.
Yeah, and they have a
That
reason.
we, I think we'll see a reaction to in the days to come. I hope so.
I saw one interview with, the garden, I'm not sure where it was from, he was in DC,
Yeah.
and he wasn't sure what a lawful order was gonna be,
Mhm.
you know. I was just following orders, what was not a defense.
Well, one of the things I hope for, if we do get through this, is that somehow, some way, we can bind the wounds
Mhm.
that we've created. And we can avoid the tit for tat retribution mentality. And that may well mean letting some people get away with murder,
Mhm.
you know. But it seems to me it's got to end some way, somehow here. And I just hope it doesn't spin out of control where we, the good guys, feel no choice but to, you know, counter.
Can we out gerrymander? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
like a back and
Yeah.
forth, which to me, the whole thing is ridiculous. But it's almost like you have to do it now.
Well,
And
yeah, yes, it's like, you know, the ox is in the ditch.
yeah,
Yeah.
The simplest way to deal with the gerrymandering problem would be to eliminate single member districts, which are required by law only since about the 1960s. Yeah, you could have had multi-member districts. Nobody did it, but you could have had it. But there's a law now mandating single member districts. As long as you've got single member districts, you have the potential for gerrymandering. Here, and one man's gerrymandering another person, or one woman's gerrymandering another person's deal. But I really think that the Trump guys are playing with fire with their gerrymandering agenda. In that, what they're doing in trying to win more seats is make more seats more competitive here. And if the wave is blue in Texas in 2026, then those 5 seats they think they've claimed are going to swing in the other direction. When your gerrymandering strategies are essentially threefold: stacking, packing, and cracking. If you pack a district, you want to put all the folks you're trying to punish in the same district, leaving the other districts on your favor. If you crack, you'll go into an enclave in Pulaski County and split it up 3 ways to dilute minority representation. And if you're going to stack in the wake of the census and the reapportionment, you're going to put minority incumbents in the same district and force them to go against each other. 3 strategies, but all 3 risk making a district more competitive by trying to take away some of the support you have elsewhere in your districts. And it's playing with fire. But there's kind of a tipping point. And I'm a native Texan, looking at what they're doing in Texas, what they've done in Texas now. If the Latino vote does not match what Trump got in 2024, at least 3 of those districts are very much in play for the Democrats. And a couple of districts where they took folks away are gonna be in play as well, making it, probably a wash. Here, but, the bigger problem I see for representation is not gerrymandering in the House, it's the state equality in the Senate. I think if you look at House votes nationally, and you look at seats gained nationally, right now they're pretty level, pretty even. Here, you look at the Senate in terms of seats to votes, and you see a huge imbalance here. And then you give the minority obstructionist power in the Senate as well. I think the Senate's the bigger problem, but it's in the Constitution in a concrete fashion. And it's a non-starter to try to change it.
Well, what do you think about, is there a precedent in America for deporting people back to, or to a country that they're not even originally from?
I'm not aware of it. If there is. We have had, there were in the Red Scare after World War I, and to a lesser extent in the Red Scare after World War II, there were deportations of communists. You are suspected, alleged communists. But my understanding was that it would be from the country where the citizenship, came from here. I don't know. Again, this is a new one. And a very, very troublesome.
I think Betty had a question.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Sure, David.
Do you see enough Democrats interested in running for office to challenge?
Okay, yeah, that's a problem minority parties have. Particularly when through partisan sorting, most electoral units are pretty solidly in one party's camp or the other. Is the problem the Republican faced when I moved to this state. Finding quality candidates to run was an impediment for the rise of the Republican Party here in Arkansas. And slowly but surely, they persisted and they prevailed here. All I can say is it's one step at a time, Betty. And it's gonna take energized people, like people willing to go. I do think there are some educational trends that are in the mix right now that promise to help young Democrats going forward, in that the Democrats have become the party of the college educated in America, something they were not 50 years ago here. But if you're looking for the kind of people who run for office, I think Democrats are in an increasingly advantageous position as the generations go onward and upward.
At the same time,
if they can maintain it.
At the same time, the K-12 curriculum
Yeah.
is changing.
Mhm.
So, that's kind of
Yeah.
a scary thing too, so.
Yeah, you don't know, what is a twig is bent,
Mm.
So grows the tree. Yeah, we may make short term gains there.
Do you think there's, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I worry about my granddaughter
Mhm.
because she's adopted from Guatemala
Mhm.
and she's at the University of Washington. And I just saw that ICE is going to all of these,
Sure.
so it's just,
terrifying, Brenda.
it terrifies me.
Well, it really does. And again, just the sheer arbitrariness of it. And it strikes me what they're trying to do is set an example for intimidation through these outrageous actions and have everybody scared here, and afraid to take action. No, I don't want to be an alarmist, but I do think your concerns are warranted. Here it's not likely, it's not a good bit, it's a big country. And it's hard to target huge populations. But the ones who are targeted are punished. You have a question or comment?
Yes, I know people that are about my child's age, around 30.
Yeah.
Aren't happy with Democrats either because, of all of the dark money and because they cater to, capitalism really as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
Do you think there's any type of an opportunity or a possibility of more of a socialist, progressive type party coming
Okay,
into existence and having any type of a chance or
Okay.
dividing the
Sure. To
Democratic
two
Party?
thoughts of that. Democrats do face a branding problem right now. Democrats do not have a good brand in most of the country right here. And it has to do with the effect of this negative partisanship tearing down support really for both parties here. But from the Republican perspective, that's a benefit. It's not like your negative campaigning and things are going to get people to change their minds. What it'll get you to do is not vote at all. Not take action. So I do think Democrats have to do a better job of presenting themselves to the electorate. In New York. And in Arkansas. And the like, the national brand is not good. But there are enormous, what I call structural or institutional impediments to a third party emerging with any kind of chance. And the primary impediment is the single member districts and the winner take all features of them. Unless you can aspire to win, it's hard to get people to run. And third parties have to face the reality that they're not likely to win. They also have to face the active opposition of the two major parties who make it terribly difficult to run. You guys know a little bit about doing petition drives. It is hard to get the paperwork done.
Well, now it's impossible.
Yeah.
It was hard before, but now it's impossible.
But that same dynamic, Judy, works for petitioning to get on the ballot as a candidate. Yeah. You've got to work real hard. So I'm pessimistic. I think there's a better chance of the Democratic Party being taken over than there is of an alternative coming along. Trump has taken over the Republican Party in a recent example, but back in the 1890s, William Jennings Bryan and the populists and the progressives in concert essentially reshaped the Democrat nationally into something that hadn't been during the Gilded Age here. So I think you can see, because of primaries, because of the federal system, you can see a party being transformed from within. Because there's such easy access to the levers of power within the parties.
Yesterday on Facebook, I think you even forwarded it, several people did, it's a protest of Arkansas farmers and a church, and they were all crying and whining and miserable because their family farms were going out of business. And essentially every one of them supported Trump.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that those people connect their vote with what they're going through right now and change it in the next election?
Well,
That's what I'm asking. Yeah, that's what he's always told me.
Yeah, couple of thoughts on it, and certainly I don't know. But it does strike me. Well, you all know the old story about the two guys on the camping trip, and they see the bear. And one guy pauses to put on his shoes. And the guy says, "We got to go. Let's go." He said, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I've got to outrun you." Bottom line is, we do have fundamentally a two-party system. And we've all been through elections where we thought we were either riding high or in the depths of despair. And we all know that within a couple of election cycles, it turned around dramatically here. So certainly, in a negative partisanship sense, the more the Republicans screw up, the more likely independent voters. You know, we're not gonna ever get the MAGA guys.
Yeah.
But independent voters will shift in sufficient numbers. And right now, there's a lot more Democratic voters than there are Democratic proclaimers. Yeah. In other words, there's a lot of these independents you mentioned earlier who are closet Democrats.
Yeah.
There's a pretty good argument that based on data that while Gallup will tell you that somewhere around 30% of the country is independent, it's really only about 10% of a bunch of independents, and the rest of the independents are closet partisans here, and they behave electorally pretty much like we partisans for that party. In other words, the independents who vote Republican are just as loyal to the Republican Party as the, kind of the folks who say, "Yeah, I'm sort of Republican." No behavioral differences there.
We were told in the meeting several months ago that there are a lot of people in this community, if it wasn't for the embarrassment of being seen in this room, they would be here, but they're embarrassed.
It's true.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there is an intimidation factor out there. And it would, we would be ill-advised to ignore it. Here, there's enormous pressure to make us think we are an endangered minority on the scene. Yes.
Are you concerned that there might not be a fair election?
Actually, I was election commissioner here for a long time. It's going to be very, very difficult, given our federal system, to really, from a central point of perspective, fix an election here. Elections are about the most decentralized operation in American society. I can't imagine many institutions that are more decentralized than election administration here. That makes it very difficult. I do think there are things you can do at the margins to stack the deck. I think Arkansas legislators do all it can to stack the deck in terms of making it harder to vote. The basic rule is the more hassles you put in the way of people voting, the less likely they are to vote. And the Arkansas legislators spend a lot of time and energy putting hassles in the way here. And they have some like-minded folks around the country doing the same thing. But most of that action is being done in red states. Democrats weren't going to win anyway.
Well,
Here,
what about,
less of it's being done in the blue states.
Trump has threatened to do executive order to stop mail-in ballots.
He doesn't have the authority. Now he might bluff election administrators at the state level. But again, my view there is it's probably going to maintain the status quo. Because while the Texas Board of Election Commissioners might do it, the California folks are not going to do it. So I think you can't, I'm more worried about the intimidation factor of the troops being present.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking
That's
too.
more than I am the election officials being corrupted by the system. I do think if you have an election where you have folks with, guns, on the periphery of the polling place, it's gonna be an intimidation factor.
Well, I know that, illegals cannot vote, but we have a lot of, citizens that,
Yeah.
that they might target if they came to vote.
And intimidation, like I
Yeah,
said.
the ICE could
Mhm.
scare some of them, I mean, cause they load up people that are legal.
Right.
In the middle of the night, they took those children that they had no
Yeah.
legal right to move at all.
And this is symbolic politics, you're talking about a real handful of kids, but the message
Yes.
goes to 350 million Americans. So it's Tim, I see you.
The Supreme Court race in North Carolina that
Mhm.
took 6 months
Yeah.
to finalize.
Mhm.
I've read that it's kind of a trial run for what could happen. That could really, if you tie these things up for 6 months, you've messed up a lot of
Yeah.
what goes
Well,
on.
the nightmare scenario for the Democrats. And I hesitate to articulate it because I don't think it's gonna happen, but Democrats, win the House in 2000. And when they show up on January 3rd, they're not seated. And they're not seated because the Republicans refused to acknowledge that they were beat.
Yeah.
Here. I don't think it can happen. I don't think it will happen. But that's, certainly the point you raise is a valid point here. That there's a lot of opportunity for mischief in the post-election aftermath. Here.
Do you see any way that Trump could be reelected?
Not constitutionally.
So where does that bother?
Or even just
Yeah.
suspend elections and remain in power?
Again, I can't imagine the way that could play out. I can imagine him aspiring to it. And I can imagine some of his lackeys encouraging him. But I can't imagine it being actually accomplished here. 22nd Amendment is, as Richard Nixon used to say, perfectly clear. You always knew that was getting ready to lie. When he said it. But
Did you watch that last night on PBS?
oh, yeah, the American Experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
Richard Nixon.
It was well done, I thought. Well done.
Well,
Scary.
we couldn't picture the Capitol building being, torn apart and nothing being done, and them being set free and some of them given money.
I was gonna say, they're gonna get paid for it now.
We couldn't picture that happening, so.
I remember that day. For years, when I was working in Washington, I took kids to Washington in the January interterm. And we would have been on Capitol Hill that day. Now, I've been in the House chamber when they counted the electoral votes on that day. And it just, my heart just sunk thinking about, what if I was up there with 15 kids?
Some of them will probably be given the Medal of Freedom or something.
Steve Deanna's gonna get it, looks like.
Yeah, and he was involved in all that. Yes.
I just wait to see Trump going on himself.
Yeah. Well, I want the Nobel Prize.
Well, my husband's retired military and he was devastated.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to look in the twisted mind of Trump, and I know that's hard to do. I understand the racism issue. I understand why he's going DEI, because he wants white people in the jobs, and he really truly thinks blacks are inferior. What I don't get is the elimination in the curriculum and the Smithsonian of even an acknowledgement that there was a civil war, other than they've gone with the win version of the civil war, where the slaves were all happy. Because that seems to be
You know, again, I hesitate to speak for Trump,
Please do.
but, I think his framework for thought and action is very much a branding perspective. I think, you know, he comes out of that world. And I think he thinks he can rebrand American history. He has enormous confidence in his capacity to shape a narrative here. And I must say, a third of the country seems on board with what he is doing. But I do think that's where that fragmentation of the media helps a little bit, in the sense that while we're not gonna reach his supporters, there is a counter narrative that can be pursued. And one of the reasons why the universities are under such threat right now is that Trump understands it's the university faculties, not their administrators, but the university faculties who are ready, willing, and able to counter that narrative.
As a historian, former historian, the thought of a lot of those artifacts, if they're destroyed, they will never come back. I mean, it was, I hope whoever's doing this takes it to some building and locks it up. But all of their websites that have been stripped of all the narrative, I hope somebody's able to, I mean, that's our entire history is being rewritten on websites.
It's just like 1984, you know, we've always been at war
War is
with
peace.
Pacific.
Yeah.
Well, people our age grew up under the Daughters of the Confederacy curriculum. And I think that's what we want to reinstitute. It was not real, but it was what we were taught, and several generations of us were taught that. And then when we found out there were other perspectives, that there were other people involved in this that didn't think that way, you know, some people never could get over that. You know, that's what they were taught, and that was true. And
It was very liberating for others.
And it only takes one generation to lose it. You know, everything that's happening now, everyone that survived the Holocaust, for example, is gone or about to be gone. And it only takes a generation.
If something happened to Trump and Vance were to take office, do you think he would change things or continue?
I think he would continue. I don't think he would have the support. There's, you know, it pains me to say it, because I don't sense it, but there's something magic about Trump. In the eyes of his followers. I missed the boat. I don't. But I don't think, and that's another thing that gives me, you know, cautious hope for the future. I just don't think Vance would have the backing to pursue that kind of agenda. First place, he's an obnoxious fellow. No, now Trump is too. But Vance doesn't have whatever charm, whatever charisma that Trump
That's for
has.
legislature, that the senators would develop backbone.
Yes.
I don't think they would just roll over for him.
And I don't think he has the intimidation factor either.
I don't think Republican senators are scared of Vance.
Yes.
I mean, he can call them all the names. They're terrified of going against Trump. They're
But I'm not sure he's as creative as Trump is in coming up with names.
Did you hear the Madam Mussolini?
There's a different Democratic candidate now out of Texas, the James.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, it's a different approach, and it seems to be.
Yeah, you know, like I say, I'm a native Texan, and Democrats have to try something new. if they're gonna,
Yes.
if they're gonna prosper in Texas, so sounds encouraging to me, but again, you just don't know until you have an election.
Yeah.
At least it's a primary election. You don't know how it's gonna play.
Yeah.
In the electorate, but it seems promising to me, Tim.
Yeah.
What about Gavin Newsom's tactics?
I think they're amusing,
Yeah,
and I think the Democrats need something to kind of boost their spirits. But I'm not sure that's the way to go in terms of trying to convince the country that you're responsible governors. And I say governors in the broadest sense here. The Democrats are the governing party in America. Party that wants to govern and knows how to govern. And I think that's the approach to take, but you've got to bring a little pizzazz into it. And I think this guy out of Illinois, Pritzker, has a lot of the right idea, but certainly, taking Trump on his own playing field, trolling, is a fun thing to do.
it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I enjoy reading.
Yeah, Newsom's good at it. He's got the cadence, he's got the
Yeah.
the definite structure.
Or his social media people.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody does, but it's a great parody, really. Hey, Betty.
I think you're saying things are not bad enough yet. They got bad enough. This leader came from nothing. But he was a leader because he was needed, and they're not, Republicans aren't bad enough yet. We'll get a leader when we need them.
Like I say, let's remember, at this point, in 2017, nobody thought Barack Obama had a snowball's chance. And in a remarkably quick period of time, he made his presence known and beat our favorite daughter in the nominating contest and won the presidency in the most impressive electoral showing since Reagan. Nobody since Reagan has done as well as Obama at either party.
Are you optimistic that Chris Jones can beat French Hill?
I think redistricting made it tougher, Elaine. I do think turnout is the key. And I think a Democratic friendly electorate right now, and this wasn't the case 20 years ago, is more likely to turn out in a midterm election than in a presidential election year. So I think, while I don't think he's as good a candidate right now as Joyce Elliott was, I do think he has a chance of making a better race. Because Joyce ran a whale of a campaign.
Yeah, how could you beat Joyce?
It's at the bottom fell out at the end for her, but it's gonna be tough. The way the districts are drawn. We spoke of gerrymandering earlier. It's hard to draw a Democratic friendly district in Arkansas. You can do it, but it's hard to draw it. If you all read the Arkansas Times website, they have a few examples of the way you could draw the districts up, but you can't get them through the legislature. With the way I do think, redistricting notwithstanding, the second district is the most likely target for a Democratic takeover here. And I thought Jones